People who've seen nice people finally snap. What happened? I had just started high school and there was a new kid. I was from a 1 primary/1 high school town, so all the kids already knew each other. He was a giant aboriginal kid who was quiet with no friends, so my friend and I befriended him. We always chatted to him, and he was so lovely, always softly spoken, and generally just so nice. Like holding doors open for us, and bashfully smiling when we would go out of our way to be friendly to him. Anyway, he started getting picked on by the bad boy of our grade relentlessly. One day he snapped and beat him up with a garbage can and was expelled, and I never saw him again. Damn, getting expelled for taking out the trash makes me wonder if the school administrators who pull this poop were the bullies in their schools. Our assistant principal was a total douchebag, and every person that went with him to school said he was awful as a kid too. He attended the same high school that he now worked at. He never did anything when kids were bullied, especially if the bully was a basketball player, and the entire student body loathed him except for the basketball team which he coached. They got tons of passes for things others were punished for. I cannot express enough to you how much this guy was disliked by students. The only person he never ducked with was a close friend of mine. If I got in trouble with him, we never got punished. If I got into a fight, my friend would get involved, just so the fallout wouldn't be as bad for me. He never mentioned why for the longest time. He finally told me that when they were teenagers his mom dated the assistant principal. After they broke up he kept trying to get with her until her new boyfriend, my friend's dad, beat the living deuce out of him. Guess he didn't want to risk catching those hands again. Doesn't matter if they are young or older, bullies don't like people who fight back. I mentioned this in another thread. Samoan friend. Happiest, most friendly guy you ever want to meet. Some guy said something about his sister and of course it made him mad. My friend went after him and caught him. Punched about 3 times and we realized he was going to kill him. It took 3 of us normal sized guys to hold his arm back from hitting the guy one more time. We told the other to run. Like, run freaking now. He did. Our friend was mad at us for a while for stopping him, then he went home. The next day it was as if nothing happened. He just went back to being a super nice guy. P.S. I forgot, a couple days later our friend's big brothers were looking for that same guy that got the crap beat out of him. I don't think they found him, but never did see him again. This woman, Mary, the first worked with, was always pleasant and cheerful, said hello in the lunchroom, and was generally liked. She worked in finance in special projects. She said she wanted to retire in a few years, and she had been working there for 15 years. Her boss started pressuring her to complete our annual budget report faster, but this thing is huge and comprehensive and a figurative beast. Mary told the boss it would be ready in a couple of weeks, per the usual schedule. The boss said that it needed to be completed within 1 week to give to the higher ups. Mary said it wasn't possible. Boss emailed Mary plus CC a bunch of coworkers and the assistant managers, calling Mary out for a poor work ethic and for making the department look bad. Mary said it wasn't possible and didn't appreciate being bullied. She put in her notice to retire by the end of the week, leaving her boss high and dry. She was the only one who could do the budget report in a timely manner, so the department was double fricked. Good for her. Bowers sent an email to my boss saying I was non-compliant in my paperwork and that they were delaying my start date for 2 weeks. I was pretty irritated because I had moved countries for the job. The paperwork in question had been sent within an hour of receiving it a month prior, before I moved overseas. So I forwarded it to all of the our people that I had been communicating with and my boss. I addressed it to the one who reported me and all said, before you report me to my new manager and label me as non-compliant, maybe you should check your inbox more often. Paperwork was done a month ago. Name and shame people into taking responsibility when they act all high and mighty. There was no reason for Mary's boss to treat her that way. Good for her for standing up for herself. Just because people outrank you doesn't mean we aren't all people who deserve equal respect. Your experience reminds me of 2 times I had to deal with a certain person at work who was not in my chain of command, but held a good bit of power over my employment due to her position. I held a top secret clearance for over 25 years and the person in question was a security clearance processing rep for my department. The 2 times, you must double be juiced and explain changes in family status. So when got divorced, I notified her as per requirements. She responded with, paraphrasing, well, buddy, you're in big trouble and your clearance is in jeopardy because you never told us you got married, waltzing my boss and my boss's boss. However, I had retained the email I sent her telling her when I got married, as well as the read receipt showing she read my email, and I responded with those as attachments. That was the last we heard of that one. One time during the standard 5-year renewal, she emailed my boss to say my clearance was suspended because the paperwork was submitted late and that my boss would have to prove that my tasks required my clearance and in turn that I required the clearance. This would have put a major hitch in a particular project as my group was small and no one else could have taken over. Plus, I was the only one with particular skills/knowledge of this particular project, and if I had no clearance, I could not have explained it to anyone else. So, my boss replied with that's interesting, because I know Scrappy submitted all the paperwork 2 months before the deadline, and we had not heard of any issues with the investigation. So how is it that it came to be late? Of course, she was the one who let it lapse. My boss had to get her boss and her boss's boss involved before the issue disappeared for us. Back in 5th grade, I was super lucky to have the elementary school's favorite teacher. Every single student loved her. My class was always super loud and annoying. We were working on some assignment before PE and everyone was pissing her off. She was only allowing students to go out if they finished the assignment. My slow ass was unfortunately one of the last kids in the room. This one student, who was a god-awful and annoying poop bag kid, was being way over the top. My teacher got up, put her hands over her ears and just started screaming, shut the frick up. Just shut up. Shut up. Shut up. And she just stomped out of the room still screaming with her hands covering her ears. All of us just sat there in horror. Couple of kids just left to go to PE and I sat there just trying to finish the assignment. Our principal came into the room a few minutes later just telling the rest of us to go out to PE, but she made the poop bag kid stay in the room with her. He was moved into the other 5th grade teacher's room after this. She was completely normal and fine after coming back, and there was nothing else that went wrong for the rest of the year. Just worked her ass off and made all of us love her by her caring soul and all of that fun stuff. But that moment completely traumatized me. There was a teacher in my grade school that was the mean teacher. He was a great guy, very nice, but they gave him all of the behavioral hard cases because he could put a stop to it well enough. In one situation we had a substitute teacher. Partway through a pair of the students in the class just flat out kept pushing and pushing things, talking loudly, ignoring her when she tried to get them to stop, etc. Eventually she just burst out crying and left the room. Another teacher swapped in for the rest of the day. The next day our normal teacher was back. He taught us the first lesson, gave us our assignment to do, then told those 2 kids to stand up and follow him. They were brought outside the school and there he screamed at them for 10 minutes straight. Nothing bad in the sense of cursing or any of that, but of the sort of how dare you treat a substitute teacher that way. She's trying to teach the class. Variety. We could hear it clearly through the cinder block wall, and it was equal parts scary and giggle-inducing in us. Eventually the screaming stopped, and a few moments later the 3 came back in, the 2 kids looking like they weren't quite sure if they had died and were just slow about hitting the ground. We had a substitute teacher which became the de facto teacher eventually, since the teacher they replaced, a lovely elderly lady, was sick most of the year, though thankfully fully recovered as a result. This new teacher once said to a disturbing element that he does not have any in-between states between calm and angry. He can be either one or the other, and that no one wants to see him angry. To illustrate it, he explained that he gave one warning at most before he would take harsher measures. We seldom had anyone act out of line. Had a nice teacher who was a total pushover because of the rampant bullying by about 80% of the students in the class. She's had to leave multiple times and has had a few moments where she cried. I wrote her an encouraging message on our latest test to not give up because of the bad students, because I believed her to be a good teacher. When she gave us our graded tests back she told me quietly that she read the message but that she deducted points from my total grade because of it. Never felt my sympathy for someone drop so hard, so fast. I had an Egyptian teacher teaching us Arabic lessons in high school. He too was a bit of a pushover because his English wasn't all that great and he wouldn't know how to reprimand students in English. I always treated him well and respected him as a good Arabic teacher, but my classmates were very rowdy in his class and took advantage of his leniency. Eventually he snapped and slammed her chair continuously on the floor till it poopered into pieces and screamed, "You talk, talk, talk," followed by some, what I assume to be, Arabic profanity. Honestly found this pretty funny, then left the class and the following day things carried on as per normal. It was so sad, but students definitely were more careful in his class after seeing him destroy a chair with hand force. A long time ago, I used to do call center tech support for fairly complex issues. A really nice, quiet guy went through the same training class. He talked if you talked to him, but never went out of his way to chat. Right after training, the call center changes a ton of stuff. We start getting squeezed on the amount of time we can do job presentation, how much research time we have, just metrics in general. It was utter baldoos, because the favorites got to go on smoke breaks as often as they wanted with the managers. We'd essentially be punished for that, because we had to keep the average numbers in a certain area. He did all the right things. Talked to his manager, talked to their manager, then 2 hours. It kept getting worse, plus enforced overtime. Then he got a super long call. He was on it at least 2 hours about a complex issue, and the customer was just straight up abusing him, but he had to take it because the managers wouldn't give permission for him to hang up, and they were basically screaming at him to resolve this issue and get to his next call, but we couldn't end calls. The customer had to. One day he just stood up, stepped onto his chair, then onto his desk, threw his headset on the desk and sort of growled something like "duck this" quietly. He looked around, staring people in the face, especially the people who took those long breaks and the managers. Then he walked out and no one ever saw him again. Everyone was super quiet and afraid to move or say much of anything. It absolutely happens. Happened to me for about a year at an old job. My manager slash supervisor boss son and coworker, boss son's best friend, would go on a minimum of 4 extended smoke breaks every single day, between 10 to 20 minutes long each time. Sometimes it was roughly 1 smoke break per hour. As a non-smoker, and also not having the perks of nepotism or BFF to the boss son, I was stuck manning 100% of the phones which were constantly blowing up, while doing my actual job, and taking care of anything else that came up in our tiny, but very busy department of 3 people. It freaking sucked. Most things about that job did, but there were days when I'd just sit in my chair when they got up for a smoke break and be in a white hot rage and fantasize about chucking the phones at their big entitled heads or walking out and never coming back or anonymously reporting the company for some highly illegal crap they were doing and then grumpily pick up a phone. Lol. Took me way too long to quit that hellhole, and I heard that little department folded soon after I left. My best friend had lost his mom to murder a few months prior when we were in the 10th grade. Somehow he had pulled himself together just enough to start going back to school. I don't know how he handled it with being an only child and growing up without a father. His mom was all he had. A kid that thought he was popular that got on everyone's nerves. Cracked wise to my friend's face about his mom's death. What he said isn't exactly sure. My friend threw him on the ground and punched him in the face multiple times. The end result was a broken nose, a broken left orbital, and my friend got kicked out of school. We were very grateful he taught him a lesson, but saddened it had to come at such a high cost. That seems to be the same with schools everywhere. I was almost suspended for attacking someone who'd been bullying me for years. All incidents reported to teachers, no action ever taken. And one day he tried to trip me in the corridor and I snapped. All of a sudden I'm getting more punishment than he had ever had. Thankfully my parents were angrier about that than I was. Told the deputy head teacher that if I was suspended, it'd spend every day of the suspension talking to local press about what their school allows to go on.